Breaking news tonight as President Trump prepares for what could be the most consequential diplomatic meeting of his presidency. The White House has confirmed that Trump will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin this Friday in Alaska to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. This high-stakes summit comes as the conflict approaches its fourth year with devastating consequences for both nations. The human cost of this conflict continues to mount dramatically.
Get involved. I believe he wants to get it over with. Now, I've said that a few times, and I've been disappointed because I'd have like a great call with him, and then missiles would be lobbed into Kiev or some other place, and you'd have 60 people laying on a road dying. I said, that's cold. That's cold.
President Trump revealed today that casualty figures have reached staggering proportions, with the estimates of 5,000 to 7,000 deaths per week. The Ukrainian military has been forced to expand conscription to include men up to 60 years old, highlighting the severe manpower challenges facing the embattled nation. These numbers underscore the urgent need for diplomatic resolution. In a significant diplomatic breakthrough announced earlier this week, Putin has now agreed to potentially sit down with Zelensky.
We have been aggressively working, trying to break the logjam. One of the most important logjams is that Vladimir Putin said that he would never sit down with Zelensky, the head of Ukraine, and the president has now got that to change. We're at a point now where we're now trying to figure out, frankly, scheduling and things like that around when these three leaders could sit down and discuss an end to this conflict. If you take where the current line of contact between Russia and Ukraine is, we're going to try to find some negotiated settlement that the Ukrainians and the Russians can live with, where they can live in relative peace, where the killing stops. It's not going to make anybody super happy, both the Russians and the Ukrainians, probably at the end of the day.
This marks a major shift from his previous position of refusing direct negotiations with Ukrainian leadership. The Trump administration has been working behind the scenes to arrange this three-way meeting, with officials expressing cautious optimism about the possibility of reaching a settlement that, while perhaps not making either side completely happy, could finally stop the bloodshed. The administration's strategy extends beyond diplomatic meetings. Trump has unveiled an aggressive economic approach targeting nations that continue to prop up Russia's war machine, particularly India, China, and Brazil, who continue purchasing Russian oil.
So he's doing it through executive action, and I'm okay with that. But I stand ready to help the president. And when we get back in September, let's have this conversation.
Senator, I need to get to Gaza, but why punish India more than Russia?
More than Russia?
Shouldn't he be sanctioning Russia?
Well, the one thing I can tell you, Putin could give a damn about sanctions. He evades them. He could give a damn about how many Russians die. The one thing that he can't tolerate and live with if we go after his customers. The whole goal is to crush his customers.
The president has already imposed 50% tariffs on India and plans to deny these countries access to the U.S. economy if they continue supporting Russia through energy purchases. As one senior official put it, without oil and gas revenue, Russia's ability to sustain the conflict would collapse. Professor Jeffrey Sachs offers a different perspective on these developments.
It goes back to Clinton. The truth is, this is a U.S. deep state war. This is a CIA, Pentagon, military-industrial complex war. It has an agenda.
He argues that the conflict stems from 30 years of NATO expansion eastward, contrary to promises made after the Soviet Union's dissolution. Sachs contends that if Trump acknowledges NATO won't expand further eastward and commits to Ukrainian neutrality, peace could be achieved quickly. However, he warns that the military-industrial complex surrounding the administration may oppose such measures. Not everyone supports the current negotiation framework. Republican Congressman Don Bacon has strongly criticized the idea of negotiating without Ukraine present at the table, comparing it to the 1938 Munich Agreement, where European powers negotiated away Czechoslovakian territory to Hitler without Czech participation. He emphasizes that any negotiation must include President Zelensky and that the United States shouldn't reward Putin's invasion with territorial concessions. Vice President J.D. Vance praised these diplomatic efforts noting that President Trump has succeeded in bringing both Putin and Zelensky to the negotiating table after 3 years of conflict that has resulted in over 1 million casualties.
for over 3 years at this point, well over 1 million Russians and Ukrainian dead soldiers. And as the president says, the numbers are probably much higher than the official tally indicates. There has been no substantial breakthrough. And for 6 months, the president himself, he's asked me, he's asked Secretary Rubio, of course, Steve Witkoff, we have been aggressively working, trying to break the logjam. One of the most important logjams is that Vladimir Putin said that he would never sit down with Zelensky, the head of Ukraine, and the president has now got that to change. We're at a point now where we're now trying to figure out, frankly, scheduling and things like that around when these three leaders could sit down and discuss an end to this conflict.
Vance stated clearly that America is done with funding what he called the Ukraine war business, signaling a major shift in U.S. policy. The administration plans to end direct financial support to Ukraine, though it remains open to European nations purchasing American weapon systems directly. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov revealed crucial details about recent diplomatic exchanges.
There was no Maidan, no revolution, nobody was instigating people to do it.
In meetings with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, American officials expressed desire for normal relations based on national interests. They acknowledged that U.S. and Russian interreg, STS, may not align even 50% of the time, but when they do coincide, both nations should develop mutually beneficial projects while working to prevent military confrontation when interests diverge. Some international observers have made controversial claims about the conflict.
Dear friends, of course, we are all following the trend around the meeting of the American and Russian president scheduled for August 15th next week. I would like to return to the direction of Slovak social democracy and the truth in evaluating the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. Practically in everything. Everyone already knows that the conflict has its serious roots in recent history, that it has no military solution. Everyone already knows that Ukraine's membership in NATO is impossible. Everyone already knows that Ukraine was used by the West to try to weaken Russia, which failed. And for what will Ukraine have to pay a high price? Remember the old African truth that I like to repeat so much. It doesn't matter if elephants are fighting or having sex, grass always suffers. Let the elephant mating on August 15th in any case suffer the grass. In this case, Ukraine.
They argue that Ukraine was instrumentalized by the West in a failed attempt to weaken Russia, and that Ukrainian political leadership shares responsibility for the current situation. These voices claim the war could have ended as early as April 2022, just 2 months after it began, but was prolonged by Western intervention. The territorial question remains the most contentious issue. Trump has suggested that some form of land swapping may be necessary for peace, acknowledging that Russia currently occupies what he described as prime territory, including much of Ukraine's coastline. However, Ukrainian President Zelensky has firmly rejected any territorial concessions, stating that Ukraine's constitution prohibits ceding sovereign territory and that Russia cannot be rewarded for its aggression. European foreign ministers are holding emergency meetings in response to being excluded from the initial Alaska talks.
There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both.
President Trump is preparing to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska this week to try to end the war in Ukraine. But Ukraine is not invited, ceding territory is against the war-torn nation's constitution. President Volodymyr Zelensky is hoping Mr. Trump won't cave to Russia's demands.
Everyone sees that there has been no real step from Russia toward peace. No action on the ground nor in the air that could save lives.
Thank you very much.
European foreign ministers will hold an emergency meeting in the coming hours to work out what to do about also being frozen out of the Alaska talks.
Europeans cannot and must not be mere spectators when it comes to such a crucial strategic issue for the future of Europe.
US Vice President J.D. Vance says a summit with Presidents Trump, Putin and Zelensky would happen later.
They emphasize that they cannot be mere spectators on issues crucial to Europe's future security. The UK's Foreign Secretary and senior Ukrainian officials have conducted urgent video conferences with the Trump administration to present their negotiation priorities, which are now under review ahead of Friday's summit. As Friday's meeting approaches, the stakes could not be higher. This summit represents a critical juncture that could either end one of the deadliest European conflicts since World War II or potentially reshape the global order in ways that will reverberate for decades. The world watches as these three leaders prepare to meet, with millions of lives hanging in the balance.